Okay, we're going to finish up 2-6 today. Really, I need to fix that because we're really just doing segment proofs today. So let me change this. Okay, today we're talking about segment proofs. So we're going to walk through a few examples together, then you'll be able to practice those. Now, last week we talked about the different like postulates, theorems, definitions that we will use when we are proving segments today and then angles tomorrow, okay? So on page 3, you should be down here, looks like this, complete the proof. Everybody with me on that page? Okay. Now the nice thing for you is today on your work, you're going to have steps given to you. Some of them are filled in, so it kind of helps you work through those together, okay? Now, we all know our first step in the proof is to state what? The given. What's the given here? Okay, LM. Segment LM is congruent to segment NP. Okay, now, we know if two things are congruent, what does that mean? They're equal. So that's going to be our step 2. What can I say on step 2? LM is equal to NP. And what says that those are congruent? Definition of congruence. Good. So definition of congruence just says if two things are congruent, then they are equal. Okay? Now, what are we trying to prove? It tells us to prove what?
Segment NP is congruent to segment.
Yeah, that segment NP is congruent to LM. Well, what do I need to do first with these two things? Flip them, right? What property says that I can switch that? Symmetric property says that I can rewrite NP is equal to LM. Symmetric property of what? Equality, right? Because the two things are equal on this step. Okay, then what would be my fourth step here? Yeah, so now I can say they're congruent. NP, segment NP is congruent to segment LM. Like David said, again, definition of congruence. Okay, so really, we're just, like I said, we're going to be using some of those definitions, some of those postulates to kind of just walk us through these proofs that prove these two things are the same. Okay? Yes? Questions on this one? All right, number 2. Okay, Tyler, what would I start with for number 2?
The given.
Okay, which is what?
PQ equals QS. And
Con-
then QS equals ST.
Congruent to. Okay, good, because that is given to us. So it tells us these two different things are congruent. What is it that we're trying to prove? PQ is equal to ST. So first, just looking at these things that are congruent, does anyone see something that I could eliminate here? Yeah, right? We notice they both have QS, so what could be my next statement?
PQ is congruent to ST.
Good. PQ is congruent to ST for what reason? What says if two things are equal to the same thing, then those two things are equal? Great job. Transitive property. So transitive property of congruence because these two things were congruent. Okay? And then we should know the last step because we just used it twice on the proof before. What can I say for my final answer? Good. PQ is equal to ST, and we know that's true because definition of congruence. Okay? It's not too bad, right? I know some of it is requiring you to kind of like look at it and think, but again, when you get to your work today, it's kind of like fill in the blank. It might give you the reason and you just have to fill in the statement, or it might give you the statement and then you fill in the reason. So it is a little easier for you when we get to those on your own, okay? Kind of like this last one. All right, so on our last one, it tells us M is the midpoint of AB. What's reason number one? Given. We all know that. Nobody should ever miss that one. Okay? Part 2 says, bless you, AM is congruent to MB. Does anyone know the reason those two things are congruent? Say it again. Yes, so definition of midpoint. Right? Anytime, you guys, that it tells you what the midpoint is and then tells you that the two parts are equal or congruent, that shows definition of midpoint. Okay? Now, what's the next thing that they give you? Definition of congruent segments. Does anyone remember what definition of congruent segments says? We've just talked about it 3 times. Okay, so then what would I write on number 3, Peyton? Very good. If two things are congruent, then they have to be equal. Okay? Now, here's where we have to be a little careful. Can anyone tell me how we went from AM equals MB to 7x equals 3x plus 20?
Substitute.
Say it again.
Substitute.
Where did you see that at? Up here, right? Okay. The length of AM is what? 7x. So they took that, substituted it here. What's the length of MB? They took that, substituted for MB. Very good. Okay. Now, obviously we're trying to solve for what? X. So what would be, from step 4 to step 5, what would be my one step to move X? Okay, so we know we're going to use subtraction. What's 7x minus 3x?
4x.
So here we would get 4x is equal to 20. Then how did they go from 4x equals 20 to x equals 5? Division property. Okay. We feel like this is doable?
Yeah.